Yes, it's 6:03. More people will join, I'm sure, as we move along. I see more are coming. Do you see any more, Pam, in the waiting room?
Not currently.
Okay, all right, I'm going to start. Okay, so I'm going to read a brief introduction of Rabbi Ellen Bernstein, and then she's going to take it away from there. What we've decided is if we'd like to eventually turn this into a conversation, if as she moves along, if there are parts of the teaching that she does or parts of her Haggadah that interests you, feel free to raise your hand and ask a question, and we'll turn this into more of a conversation in a little while when she's going to teach a little bit, and then we'll talk about the Haggadah. But first, let me read about her. Rabbi Ellen Bernstein wrote this. So these are her words, and I love them, so I stole them off her website. I write, teach, speak, and consult about the role religions, and in particular Judaism, can play in response to our daunting climate predicament. I founded Shomrei Adamah, Keepers of the Earth, the first national Jewish environmental organization, in 1988, and have been thinking and writing about the relationship between ecology and religion ever since. I believe religious and spiritual communities can be vitally important in organizing, inspiring, and sustaining individuals in the repair of the world, and I work to help mobilize them. Her books include The Splendor of Creation, Ecology, and the Jewish Spirit, and Let the Earth Teach You Torah. She is the author of The Promise of the Land, her Haggadah, a Passover Haggadah, and has been called, quote, the birth mother of the Jewish environmental movement. With that heavy, heavy burden on your shoulders, Rabbi Ellen Bernstein.
Thank you so much, Marty. It's really fun to be here, and with so many great women and a few men too. I saw that Bob Schloss just asked. By the way, I probably am not going to be looking at the chat. There's only so many balls I can juggle at once. But I saw that he asked if there was an e-version of the Haggadah. There is. I know that Amazon has one, maybe Barnes and Noble, I'm not really sure, but Amazon definitely has an e-version. However, I'm always recommending, why bother with the e-version when you can get a hard copy that's so beautiful and it's just basically the same price. So, okay. So I want to start out just by asking a question, and if anyone has a quick answer, I'd love to hear it. And then I'll move into some teaching. But this Haggadah, I was asked to write this Haggadah by Berman House. So they came to me about 4 years ago, and they asked me to write a Passover Haggadah from an ecological perspective. And it wasn't something like, I wasn't immediately jumping up and down and thinking, oh yeah, that's, I'm going to be able to do this easily. So I'm just curious, if you were in, and you may not have any answers to this, but if you were asked to write a Haggadah from an ecological perspective, does anything in particular jump out at you that you would want to focus on? And if there's no answers, that's fine. But I just wanted to sort of set up.
I would say the plagues.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Oh,
I think Joseph's interpretation of the dream. The 7 years of plenty, and then the 7 years.
Raised my hand.
Okay, great. The 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine. Okay, and Judy, did you?
It's over.
I'm sorry. Judy, or Jacqueline?
Yes, I was going to talk about the 7 years of, and then letting the earth rest, not just destroying the earth with the same crops over and over and over without giving the earth a rest.
Great. Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. All right, so so basically so this was my task, right? Was to write a Haggadah from an ecological perspective. And my question to myself was, okay, yeah, I was, I knew about the plagues and of course, Karpas, there were a few things here and there that felt ecological to me, but the primary theme of the Passover Haggadah is freedom. And so I just felt like if I were going to write a Haggadah from an ecological perspective, I would need to connect the idea of freedom to the earth. That was really the task that I saw in front of me. And this was not an obvious thing to do. I mean, I could talk about the plagues, but that's not a whole Haggadah. So what I want to do is just share with you a little bit some of my thinking. And I was trained in college. I was in one of the first environmental studies programs in the country. And anyone who is a student of environmental studies, one of the first people that you study is the eco-philosopher Aldo Leopold. And Aldo Leopold wrote this great book, The Land Ethic. And I'm just going to share a few quotes of his because I needed to think about how I would talk about environment and ecology that was going to make sense in terms of a Haggadah. So I'm going to share my screen. And we'll look at, can everyone see this? I'm going to read some of these. Just go like this if you can see. Yeah, okay, great. All right. So Aldo Leopold, he was writing in like the 40s, 1940s, and he developed what he called a land ethic. And basically, he made some very important observations. He talked about how we don't take land seriously. We treat land as a commodity. And he said that we have an ethic in our world between people, between people, individuals and each other, individuals and God, but we don't have an ethic that includes the land. And for him, land meant not just dirt, it meant soil and water and air and insects and plants and animals and us. So Aldo Leopold really saw land as this living organism, as an ecosystem. And I'm just going to share a few of these statements that he made. We abuse land because we see it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect. And then the second quote, all ethics so far evolved rest upon a single premise, that the individual is a member of a community of interdependent parts. The land ethic simply enlarges the boundaries of the community to include soils, waters, plants, and animals, or collectively, the land. And just one other beautiful quote from Wendell Berry, who for me is one of the most wonderful farmer poets of our times. And he wrote, if you have no land, you have nothing. No food, no shelter, no warmth, no freedom, no life. So for those of us who grew up in ecology, we're schooled in this whole idea of the value of land, the meaning of land, the life of land. I'm gonna stop my share. And I feel like most ecologists and biologists have a very different understanding of land than the general population, who may be very unaware and are mostly thinking about land in terms of territory, something to acquire, and real estate, you know, and aren't treating land as an organism having a life of its own. So this is background information for you to understand how I started thinking about all of this. So this is my background. This is where I came from, and now I just want to jump like a couple decades ahead, and I started the first Jewish environmental organization in 1988. And in the beginning, we were looking at various ecological dimensions of the Bible. And we were sort of, we meaning a lot of people who are interested in these ideas. And we were seeing like tidbits here and there of ecological wisdom. And for years, we tried to bring all this wisdom together and wrote different books. But I always felt like there must be some thread that tied all of these ecological tidbits together. And I just wondered about this for a long time. And then all of a sudden I started thinking, maybe I should look at the idea of land in the Bible. Maybe that's the thread that I'm looking for. Because, well, some of you probably know, there's just this in Hebrew, right? Where the human is Adam, the earth is Adamah. There's this total inherent link between person and land just revealed in the Hebrew language itself. So anyway, I decided I should do a word search. And this was sort of just when I had just started using computers and becoming more facile with this. And lo and behold, the words Eretz, one of the words for land or earth, and the word Adamah both appear many times in the Bible. The word Eretz appears over 2,000 times. Eretz can mean earth and land, and Adamah means land and soil, and it also can mean earth. And I thought, wow, maybe I'm really onto something here. And then the more I studied, the more I saw the ways in which we are oblivious to the word Eretz as it occurs in the Bible, or we just think of it as a territory to acquire. We don't think of Eretz usually in terms of earth, the life-giving earth. And so as I was, doing all this research, looking at every time that Eretz occurs, I started noticing that people would, rabbis and scholars and, just regular Jews, would look at, they'd quote various lines of the Bible, and there would be this part about the earth that they just drop. So for example, honor your father and mother. Does anyone know why you're supposed to do that? The phrase does not end right there. It says, in Torah, it says, honor your father and mother so that you may live long on the land, so that you may live long on the earth. Justice, justice, you shall pursue. Why? It doesn't stop there. So that you may live long on the land. And there are many, many instances of this happening in the Bible where land is part of the relationship between us and God. But we always just kind of drop it. You know, it's like we walk on the earth, we don't notice that it's there, we don't notice its value, and it's the same in its appearances in Torah. So now I'm going to get back to my original story, right? When Berman House came to me and asked me to write a Haggadah, it took me a while, but I started thinking, okay, I've been thinking about land. Maybe I need to go back to some original sources and really consider, you know, is land at all a part of the Haggadah? Because other than what Ellen and one other person already brought up about the famine in the land, right? Which in my Haggadah, that has a prominent place. But I was very unaware of land having a significant place in the Haggadah. So I went back to the original sources and I looked at the Talmud, and the Talmud gives you a few things that you're supposed to do in like the earliest rabbis, when they're talking about how you celebrate the Passover, they give you a few things to do. One is drink 4 cups of wine, say some blessings, say some psalms, and read one passage from the Bible. Okay? And I'm sure some of you know what that passage is, and I'm going to share it. Second. Oops, 1 second. Okay, can everybody see this? My father was a wandering Aramean. Just yes. Okay. So this is the passage that you're supposed to read for Passover. So again, in the Talmud, all it says, like your Seder could take 15 minutes, according to the Talmud. You know, you just drink these 4 cups of wine and read this passage of going from like destitution to liberation. And this is the passage. My father was a wandering Aramean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there and became a very great nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us. They oppressed us. They imposed heavy labor on us. We cried out to God. God heard our pleas and saw our plight. And then God freed us with a mighty hand. And that is the section that you generally see, and not even always, but you generally see. I mean, you'll definitely see this in an Orthodox or conservative Haggadah, but a lot of times we don't really notice it because it's all bound up inside of a midrash. And it's very difficult to understand. So a lot of people drop this section entirely, okay? But what I realized when I went back to the original was that the rabbis originally said, read the whole passage. My father was a wandering Aramean. And lo and behold, the rabbis then, the later rabbis, when they wrote the Haggadah now, they never included the whole passage. They dropped the last 2 lines. And the last 2 lines are, God brought us to this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Wherefore I now bring back the first fruits of this land, which you, God, have given me. So it was like, oh my goodness, here's the land. Even the rabbis dropped it, right? We've been dropping it all along, and the rabbis dropped it 2,000 years ago and didn't include it in the Haggadah. And we can have a conversation about why that happened, but I just want to show you that it did happen. I also just want to show you that the context for this whole passage is what's up here in italics. So when you come to the land that God has given you, take some of the first fruit of the soil, bring it from the land that God is giving you, put it in a basket, and go to the place that bears God's name. And then you're supposed to recite these following words. And this actually, this little condensed version was for the rabbis, sort of the essence of the whole Torah. But again, the early rabbis included these last two verses, which those of you who celebrate Shavuot know that this is the Shavuot Bikurim section. But anyway, I just want to explain to you that for me, these two lines, God brought us to this place and gave us this land. It's basically what this is saying to me is that, well, I read the first 4 verses, right? My father was a wandering Aramean, and we went down to Egypt and we were miserable, and then God freed us. And I always ask the question, why did God free us? You know, just because? And to me, here's the answer. God brought us to this place and gave us this land, and now we're supposed to complete the cycle and bring the first fruits of the land back to God. Now, we can discuss this more, but for me, this all fits into this whole idea, which a lot of people are talking about right now, which is the idea of reciprocity, that we receive from the earth, and we need to give back to the earth. And by sharing our first fruits, we can read that literally, of bringing the first fruits back to the temple and to feed the poor people in our community, people that are less fortunate. We can also read it more metaphorically, that we're given all of this goodness, and it's our job to bring back our first fruits, whatever our gifts are, right? That the way that we heal, restore the earth, the way that we live ethical lives is to bring our gifts back, bring our first fruits back to serve in whatever way, whatever contribution we can make. Okay, so like it's really understanding what our gifts are, what our first fruits are that we can give back. So what I want to do right now is show you how I handled this section in the Haggadah. But before I go there, I know this is a lot of material, and I want to see if anybody has questions first. And I'm going to stop my share.
I'm going to speculate that the reason those last 2 verses were dropped is there was a lot of congealing when our ancestors were in Babylonia, and they were probably uncomfortable talking about, well, right now, this year, we can't go back to that place. That's my hypothesis. No data.
Right. No, and it's a hypothesis that many of us share. And a lot of people talk about the trauma, right? The trauma of being in exile and then dropping, needing to forget about the land because it's too painful. The Israelites lived on a land, and now they don't have a land anymore. But the fascinating thing is that it's been dropped for the last 2,000 years. Nobody's restored these lines, right? I think somebody in Israel might have put them back in an Israeli Haggadah, but as far as I know, I'm the only English speaker that's done that, and that sees this from an ecological perspective. But thank you, Bob. Do I know you, Bob? You look really familiar. Okay.
I was really privileged when you presented the Haggadah right when it came out at Limud, New York.
Oh, okay.
I was in that group. It was fascinating.
Okay, great.
Judy Singer has a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, when you were talking about the fact that we cite all these great sources, but then we drop this little section that says that you should survive on the land and live long. The second paragraph of the Shema is my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
It's always read, quote, silently, which means it's not read, because even though I try to read all of it, I don't have time to finish it. and it's kind of scooted aside. And it's so important that there are laws and the ways that we should be. And if we are that way, if we follow those laws, we survive on the land. And if we don't, we don't. In such a way, in certain ways that we see currently.
Exactly. I think what you said is beautiful. And why don't we like start a movement to get the second paragraph read out loud? I mean, how simple is that? How hard could that be?
I gave a brush on it once.
Uh-huh.
And this is in a Reconstructionist synagogue.
Uh-huh.
And the comment that some of the congregants made to me was, that was crunchy.
What?
Well, you know what? How many years ago was that? It might be different now.
5.
Okay. Try it again. Give the Devar Torah again. See what happens.
Is that a really long paragraph?
It's kind of long.
Could someone tell me what that is? Just a little synopsis of it.
If you will listen to all my commandments that I command you with all you, that you will have.
You'll have grain. You'll have the rain will fall, and you'll have
this
grain.
has to be read.
And if you don't listen to my commandments, the rain will stop. The land will become a desert, and you'll perish from the land on which you live. You'll perish from the earth in which you live. It is completely profound.
Oh,
right.
Right.
And true. It needs to be incorporated. It's amazing.
I think the reason that it's kind of hush hush, well, at least in the Reconstructionist movement or the Reconstructing Judaism movement, is that it makes a direct correlation between following God's laws, which can be very nitty gritty and not necessarily ecological, and being chastised. That is, if you're a good little Jew, God will love you. And if you're not, it's very punitive. And
right. So let me just say one last thing about that. And then let's get back to the Haggadah. And this is a wonderful conversation. And I'm happy to, go more of this, but I want to say that was considered a reward punishment text, right? And that was considered childish and unsophisticated. Right. So it was actually dropped from the Reconstructionist and Reform prayer books in for probably several decades. And it's only recently been reinstated in those prayer books. But, it's fascinating how times change and how we need to, things are fluid. And so if we together were to write something about this, we could change the prayer books, right? I mean, it's the same prayers. We're just saying, let's say these out loud. This really matters now. Okay. So what I want to do is I'm going to share the Haggadah now. And I'm going to start by sharing the section we just talked about. So hang on. Let's see. Stop. Sorry about this. Things disappear and I don't know what happens to them on Zoom. Okay. Okay, there it is. Sorry. Thanks for your patience. Okay. See it now? The Haggadah? Yes. Okay. So I'm gonna flip quickly to the section we were talking about. And don't worry, we'll. Should have gone the other way. Okay, there we are. All right, so just to show you. So this is my father was a wandering Aramaean section of the Haggadah, and I include all of the text here. The way this Haggadah works is that the text, the traditional text is all in green. And then there's sidebars with comments in brown, and then this black text, I suggest some of it be red, and it's sort of the central part. It's the tissue that ties all of the traditional texts together. So here I have my father was a wandering Aramaean, and here's where I stuck in the Adonai brought us to this place in bold. And basically those of you who are familiar with the Haggadah know that the rabbis broke this down, put it into a midrash, a Jewish story that is very inaccessible, and a lot of people just don't even read it. And what I did was I took this back. I took this passage and I put it back where it belonged in the Bible, and basically wrote a little story relative to each line. And here, for Ellen's sake, I have the dream here. Joseph's knack for deciphering dreams got him out of the pit. And then this there's just a little bit about Joseph here. And so I tell the story in terms of my father was a wandering Aramaean and went down to Egypt. And that's the Passover story that I tell, and became a great nation. And then how Pharaoh treated us. And just like Pharaoh tried to crush our mushrooming clan, an empire could amass vast amounts of grain. Again, going back to the land and the farming idea here. And as long as there was a place to store it, the empire could become enormously rich. The richer Pharaoh grew, the greedier he grew, the more he oppressed our people. And with no one in the court to look out for us, we were outsiders and displaced and landless. We gradually became slaves in Egypt. And Egypt, the most powerful empire of the world, got rich off the work of our hands. Okay, and then we cried out to God, and God came and saved us. Okay, and just in this section, then God, the God of our ancestors worshipped, an invisible God we could barely imagine, appeared out of nowhere, creating havoc throughout Egypt with one frightful plague after another. Bloody waters, croaking frogs, dead beasts. All of creation seemed to be convulsing in rage at Pharaoh. And then, so then here the 10 plagues fit totally naturally into the story. And we have the 10 plagues. God could have sent an army to overthrow Pharaoh, but that's really interesting. Why did God have creation convey the message to Pharaoh? It's again, this is a very naturalistic ecological perspective. The plagues perverted the entire natural order. God had created the earth and all its creatures. Now God was undoing creation in Pharaoh's corner of the world. Through all this, our faith in an unseen God, the creative universal life force, began to grow. When we were finally able to imagine ourselves as a free people in a land we could call our home, our collective energy seemed to well up. Maybe we even roused the east wind. It blew so hard that it split the Red Sea. The waters opened up like a birth canal, and we fled from Egypt. And and crossed safely to the other side. Then I have all of this ecological dimensions of the plagues. Again, we can come back to that in a minute, but I want to show you this. So this is the section I was telling you that I reclaimed, that I brought back into the Haggadah. So so after the plagues, then Adonai brought us to this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And I just want to read through the section here, because again, for me, this is the crux of the Haggadah, and it doesn't need to be for other people. That's fine, but I'm just letting you know that this passage was what inspired me to write the Haggadah. Okay, getting out of Egypt was not the hardest part. We would spend 40 years wandering in the wilderness before we could receive a land where we could set roots, grow our own food, and finally be free. It would take all that time to heal from the condition of slavery that we inherited in Egypt. In Egypt, Pharaoh owned and exploited the land and everything in it, the fruit trees, the animals, the gold deposits, and us. In Pharaoh's ownership economy, people and creatures were commodities to be bought and sold. If we were going to inherit a land, we would need to honor the dignity of all people, all creatures, and the land. God freed the Israelites, not just for our sake, but for the sake of the entire creation. The land and its creatures belong to God. We could not own the land because land has a life of its own. We were to treat the land as a commons, which everyone could share and enjoy together, just as we all share the air. We were to see ourselves as God's tenants, guests on the land. The hardest lesson for us to learn was that the land could not be guaranteed. If we neglected the land's need for rest every 7th year, if we forgot the Sabbath, if we avoided giving to the poor or hoarded the land or its produce, our behaviors would reverberate in the land, and one day the land may be unable to endure our indifference any longer. The land may have no recourse but to spew us out. If we wanted to dwell freely in the land for generations, we would have to know what farmers have always known, that caring for land, caring for the earth, is a matter of life and death. It requires dedication, perseverance, and love. So again, all of this language, or most of this language, really comes directly from the Bible itself. I'm not like just the whole notion of the land spewing us out, right? Those of you who are familiar with Torah know that language occurs in the Bible. And then the last piece of this section, now I bring back the first fruits of the soil, which you, O God, have given me. So I just want to read one of the sidebars here. We live in reciprocity with God and the land. God gives us a land, and we bring the land's fruits back to God. Returning our fruits to God ensures that the cycle of giving is unbroken. And so again, bringing fruits back to God, we have to use our imaginations as to what that means. Again, it can be this literal thing of bringing the fruits and understanding God sort of as reality, and that we're giving the fruits to those people that need them. Or we can talk about bringing our own parts of our personality and our being to make the world a better place. Bring our gifts. Okay, so again, I want to stop here, see if there's any other questions. I'm not going to stop the share because I want to also continue showing you more from the Haggadah, but are there any questions? Marty, how long are we going? Marty or Ellen, how long is the session?
But I think we have till 7.
We go till 7, or if it goes a little bit over.
Okay.
I'm sure that's okay.
Okay. So does anyone have any questions about what I've just said? And if not, are there, before I start going through the Haggadah from the beginning, are there certain things that you're really interested in?
I'm so interested in your commentary about microbes in the earth. I see some amazing little scientific gems put into this. And, you know, my sister and I, we were talking with Ellen earlier today about regenerative farming and, you know, how that's a part of what we need to do to save our earth. And this is it. This is, you know, what you are expressing here is that.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. I just, given what you just said, I want to read one of the comments here. This is a comment in this whole section of God giving us a land. Farmed properly in traditional ways, the land itself is one of our best defenses against climate change. Building topsoil with humus, adding organic material, minimizing soil disturbance, avoiding chemical fertilizers and pesticides, and safeguarding the ground with perennials or cover crops will, over time, increase soil carbon. And, you know, there's plenty of people out there that really think that regenerative agriculture is one of the primary solutions to climate change. But again, this sort of, you know, we've really lost touch with this land-centered aspect of our tradition, and it is huge. It's huge. Other comments before I go back, or questions?
I have a question or a request.
Sure.
I was just hoping that you could present an approach to incorporating this into an actual Seder. Is there so much here to read? And I know how our group goes. It's, you know, difficult to keep people's attention.
Okay. All right. So let me talk about that as I go through it.
Excellent.
So first of all, you know, this Haggadah is, it's traditional in some ways, and then it has all this commentary that's definitely more modern. And you can use this as your primary Haggadah. You don't need to use, you know, you don't need to use this as a supplement. This can be used as the primary Haggadah. It has all the traditional material in it, or most of the traditional material, not everything. But again, I went back to the biblical sources and focused on, you know, so I brought in this biblical dimension that no other Haggadah has. So in some ways, you could say this is super authentic. But so let me, just to answer your question, is what you're saying that you can just never get through a full Haggadah, that there's just too much material?
What we've been using forever, my entire life, has been the traditional Maxwell House participant leader, group, you know, that, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's what we've been using. So we have a few other books that my husband and I have worked on. Mostly he's done it, where he would say, you know, he would pick out a few pieces of some other book.
Right.
So that's been okay.
Right. Okay, well, let me just say that, you know, there's millions of Haggadot out there, and it's really, really fun to take advantage of other Haggadot besides Maxwell House. And, you know, it's like this whole flowering of Jewish culture. You can see a whole flowering of Jewish culture just by looking at Haggadot. So again, you can use this as your primary Haggadah. And I'll go through and show you favorites of my, of mine. If your family feels the need to use something like Maxwell House, you could use this in a supplemental way. And this Haggadah is laid out in the same 15 steps, and the Magid section is also, follows the traditional order. So you just spend some time studying this Haggadah and the Maxwell House, if that's what you use, and try and bring the readings from this Haggadah in where they fit. So I'm going to actually start with Kadesh. So one of the things that I love about the Seder is that the first few steps are really all about setting up sacred space and getting us in touch with the elements. So the first thing we do, I'm not going to go back to that page, but the first thing we do is light candles, right? So that's fire. And then we make Kiddush and connect with the earth that way, through drinking of the wine and being in touch with the grapes and the connection to the earth. Then we wash, so we're connecting with water here, and then we do karpas, which again is a connection to the soil. And then after karpas we start with.
I bought at a yard sale or a thrift shop, I saw a box of
Can people mute themselves?
5.
All right. So then we have karpas, and then we begin the Magid section of the story, which is really, some of us think of in terms of air because it's the breath and speaking. But I want to spend a moment on karpas because I think that it's this beautiful ecological dimension of the, really right kind of in your face, this ecological dimension. And I want to say, even before I discuss this part, that in Spartic tradition, okay, in Spartic traditions, there's this a tradition of decorating your table with karpas. Now, karpas is all the greens, the fresh greens that grow out of the earth. And again, in the old days, and what the older Haggadah will tell you is that you eat parsley for this, right? But you can eat any greens. It's any greens that come out of the earth. Karpas is the fruit of the soil. And so you can, as these Spartic tradition people have done, is decorate their whole table with greens. And it can make a beautiful way of entering into sacred space and entering into nature indoors. Of course, if you can hold your Seder outdoors, all the better. So again, so for karpas, you could take a paragraph. If you were using a different Haggadah, you could take a paragraph from here and add it. Karpas refers to the green vegetables, the parsley, arugula, and other greens that sprout from the soil. It symbolizes the vibrant, verdant energy of spring, of life's urge to break through the dry earth. It reminds us that the freedom to just be, to express one's inner nature, is the most essential freedom. Okay, so we'll just move along a little bit. So yachatz is the splitting of the matzah. Let me just also say that the Passover Haggadah is an opportunity for conversation, right? The 4 questions are this primary part of the Seder. But the primary thing that the 4 questions are telling you is that the Seder is a time for asking questions. And So it's fine to have some chaos at the Seder. It doesn't have to be this really formal meal. You're supposed to have a good time and feel free, joyful. So, so just engaging in questioning and conversation is a great thing. And you don't have to touch, you don't have to go through and read every piece of the Haggadah. No, as I said, if you want to go with what the original rabbis talked about, there was only like 6 lines to read, right? So, so you can really, bring your creativity into play to make this as enjoyable an experience as you want. Now, what I really like about Yachatz is that it has profound meaning, even and today in terms of the pandemic, and I'm just going to spend a little time on this page. Matzah is the simplest of all foods, wheat and water, humble pie. It is parched, dry, and unassuming like the desert. When we consider matzah relative to bread, one of its meanings becomes clear. Bread is the puffed up version of wheat, far removed from the flour and the earth from which it comes. In the context of Passover, bread symbolizes the additives and excesses that weigh us down and enslave us. Passover is the path back to basics. The earth, the wheat, and the water are essential selves. Passover teaches that freedom comes when we rid ourselves of the burden of too much. For now, we simply admire the matzah and reflect on it, the root food of our peoplehood. And here is a wonderful place to have a breakout session. So one of the beautiful things of Zoom, if you're having a Zoom Seder, is that you can use the breakout function and divide people up into groups and use these talk about it questions to have people think about. It gives people an opportunity to participate. Maybe they feel too shy to participate in a big group, but if there's just a few people in the breakout session, it affords another way for participation. So here's a couple of questions, and you can come up with others. If matzah teaches simplicity, what foods might we want to enjoy during Passover? If matzah suggests that we enslave ourselves to the excesses of our culture, what excesses or additives might we want to avoid during Passover? Some of you know that there's a whole industry of developing Passover foods with all kinds of additives so that you can, have all these boxed, cakes and all kinds of things. For me, that is totally against the grain of Passover because for me, the idea is to live in simplicity. And I personally love just eating fruits and vegetables and the most simple foods I can for Passover. Now, this other talk about it here, I feel like is also very important. The broken matzah is symbolic of our brokenness and the brokenness of the world. Some of us have broken with the past. We may have lost a sense of history and a connection to our ancestors. Others may feel broken or detached from their earthly home. We may have lost touch with the natural world and all that it gives us freely every day. So, and then, at this time we're breaking the matzah. So that's why we're talking about all this brokenness. But here in a year of living through a pandemic, people have a lot to say about brokenness. And this is another beautiful question to allow people to talk about what's going on in their own lives. If your Seder is small enough and people are intimate enough and want to do that together, or to do it in small groups. But are there ways that you feel broken or disconnected? How might you heal that brokenness? So, to me, the Seder is a time to have the conversations that you've been wanting to have, but sort of haven't had the opportunity to do it. Okay, so it's, we don't have a lot of time left. And I just want to, now that we've warmed up a little, are there things that people particularly want to see? Seeing that, you know, we can't cover everything. Jackie, are you gonna?
Something. My sister and I, we came from an Orthodox family, although our parents did not believe in any religious traditions, really. But our grandparents did. Actually, my grandfather had a lot to do with that Maxwell House Haggadah, which was really just a way of Maxwell House grabbing market share of the Jewish
That's exactly
people.
right.
So I would seriously, we have all of the originals, because my grandfather actually had done a lot of artwork for Maxwell House. So I would just encourage people. My sister and I have had a Ben Shahn Haggadah. I would just think we're going to definitely be buying yours. This is one of the most beautiful, creative tie-ins with our world that I've ever encountered. And I just really encourage people who've used the traditional ones to just break out a little. My friend Michelle Solomon, what did she have? He was like I can't remember. He was a Jamaican singer who did his own Haggadah. You know, there's so many creative ways to engage. I just wanted to say, don't use the Maxwell House. It's like birthday cards.
It's like Hallmark.
That's all.
Yeah, well, as you know, I second that. I feel like there is, you know, there's researching other Haggadah can be really fun. And so just take it upon yourselves to start reading. And partly, I think some people stick with what they had as children, and it's just a tradition, and whether or not it's meaningful intellectually may not matter for people. But there's a huge intellectually fascinating tradition that we have here. And just, I love for people to be able to take advantage of that. Other comments before I continue to share?
Rabbi, my name is Nelson Stern. I'm a retired attorney from Manhattan, and you've given a whole new perspective to certainly the Haggadah. But I mean, I used to always think of you know, Shema Yisrael. You know, the Lord gave you Israel as a gift. But you're pointing out that we're sort of stewards of the land. He gave it, and that's just a great addition. You know, to be a Zionist, it's not just to receive the land, but to care for the land. You know, it's not just to save you from the Holocaust. It's for you to save the land. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
I mean, thank you. That is what I'm trying to teach. Although for me, I understand land, right? Eretz means both land and earth. It can be both local and global, right? So it can apply to Israel, but for me, the way I understand land and the way I understand, just going back to this page, that God brought us to this place and gave us this land, for me, and the land is the land where you belong. And Judy Jornstrike's comment here, the promised land is the land where you belong, like a b'sher marriage, a marriage that is meant to be. It is a reciprocal relationship. So the land that we are given, the land that we inherit, to me, is the land in which we live, wherever that is. And it's not just about, it's not like, you know, a Zionist can read this from that perspective, but it's absolutely universal as well, right? So it can be any land. Again, the word Eretz in Hebrew means both land and earth. And that's what all my work is really about, is just playing with that idea, that it's simultaneously local, it's simultaneously Israel, and it's simultaneously the land in which you live. So I just wanted to point that out, but thank you, Nelson.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Ellen, it's
Yeah.
Ellen here. I really don't want to take up more of your time, but it's just so powerful. The language, if we were going to inherit a land, we would need to honor the dignity of all people, all creatures, and the land. I mean, it speaks to everything. It speaks to inequality. It speaks to the refugee crisis, to immigration, to the climate crisis and how it is driving the refugee crisis, the oppression, how we are oppressors, not just that we were oppressed and that we had a loss of freedom, but how we oppress in how we live each day, in what we use, what we consume. I mean, there's so many wonderful themes here. So there are a million conversations, just pouring from this, and I'm just very grateful, and just, I wish we had many hours to talk more, but anyway, I didn't want to take up more time.
Yeah, no, thank you. I want to, given what you just said, I want to point out something else. Let's see. I want to read a section. So this is the spiritual slavery section of the Haggadah, which speaks to what you just said, Ellen. And Rabbi Ben Weiner wrote this piece. The traditional Haggadah draws a sharp distinction between oppressor and oppressed, the Egyptian overlord and the Israelite slave. While our world is plagued by such stark imbalances of power, I find myself preoccupied with the way that our society locks us, its beneficiaries, into oppressive roles. My daily routine is sustained by the ceaseless extraction and burning of fossil fuels. When I take stock of this, I want to cry out to God, not as an enslaved Israelite, but as an Egyptian, sickened by the destructive power entangled in my hands. Going back to the land, learning to grow a large portion of my family's food with regenerative techniques, drawing sustenance from the parcel of earth where we make our home, while also doing my best to restore it as habitat to birds and bees, bears and butterflies, has felt in this regard like liberation. So I want to make a comment, given that you brought up the language conversation, Ellen. For me, I intentionally write in an understated way. I don't like beating people over the head. I don't like telling people what to do or telling them what to think. I want them, like the way that I wrote the Haggadah was for people to arrive at their own conclusions and to discover these connections for themselves. So anyway, I just wanted to say that's a very important thing for me, because a lot of people, a lot of environmental writing is very overstated, like saying you should do this or this, and there's so much certainty. And for me, one of the great things about being Jewish and that the Talmud teaches us is how to live with uncertainty. And I feel like that's a major thing that we're having to learn how to do in our lifetimes, is the uncertainty of all kinds of chaos that we're living with. Let's see, any other questions or thoughts or concerns? Or like if you're using, even if you have technical questions, I'm happy to discuss that. This is very easily used as a Zoom Seder. As I mentioned, there is now an e-Haggadah that congregants can get, and in other congregations, people have done joint ordering of the Haggadah and done big orders from Berman House, the publisher, so that you can get like a 30% discount. It's a very easy thing to do. People just use Venmo or some other, develop a spreadsheet and get everybody together and do a big group order, and then people can come and pick up Haggadot from each other. So I just want to let you know that that's an option. And the Haggadah is unbelievably reasonably priced. It's $10. So, you know, anyway, and also one other thing I just want to say is it always helps an author, if you like something that they've done, to write reviews on Amazon. Even if you don't use Amazon, it's incredibly helpful for authors.
So we have about 5 more minutes or so. We'll go to 7:15. I had been thinking maybe we can conclude with this about Moses and how he got to take the people almost to their land, and he never was going to get there himself. And it made me think about the future and how our approach to climate change at the moment needs to look forward for generations, and what we do will affect what our great grandchildren have. So I don't know if you want to end with a look in some way towards the future and the stewardship of our land, our planet. I was just thinking about time being not just us.
Right. No, that's beautiful. That's totally beautiful. And I guess, I mean, I don't have too much more to add other than this understanding that we need to bring our gifts. To me, that's, you know, this whole notion of bringing our first fruits forward is we need to get in touch with what those first fruits are. What is the most precious thing that we have to give, right? And it may be, we may have money, tzedakah, we may be wanting to support various kinds of ecological organizations or farming initiatives. I mean, that's a really simple thing that we can be doing that, you know, one of the things that I know is difficult for people, you start giving to particular groups or whatever, or in a particular way, and you don't, if you're not hooked in ecologically, you may not even know where to give. So to me, it's big, you know, like there's very little money going to environmental causes. And I've always felt like it's something that we could really do through synagogues. Even when I ran Shomrei Adamah, I used to get like every week, you know, gifts from Kita Aleph, right? From various synagogues, because they're giving tzedakah every week. So anyway, that's something to be thinking about. But I just feel like, again, as I guess Jackie was saying, relative to the Maxwell House Haggadah, a lot of times we think so narrowly about what can be done, right? And a lot of times it's, you know, we hear about political actions, but there's so many ways to be engaged. And I think learning is a really important first step. Like just begin, you know, reading Bill McKibben's climate column in the New Yorker, or, you know, just doing Google searches and you'll find something really amazing. The young poet, the young poet who spoke at
Spectacular. Yeah, at the inauguration.
At the inauguration, she has the most gorgeous poem about climate and environment. And you can go on Al Gore's, whatever his organization is, and it's situated there. But there's, you know, there's just so much to learn. And I just think that, that's the thing I guess I just want to say is just to engage in lots of different ways and just expand your intellectual horizons and ask more questions about so that you can be inspired, right? Because I feel like it's so easy to burn out and so many people are suffering from climate fatigue and climate grief. And then you just want to stick your head in the sand. I mean, it's too much. It's incredibly painful. And so that's why it's so important to find something that really moves your heart and makes you want to be involved, right? And sort of feeds you at the same time, which is this idea that I keep trying to talk about of reciprocity, right? We receive, we give back. And we can't give back either if we don't even feel we're receiving. So somehow we have to find a way to get in touch with that, all of the gifts of air and earth and water that are given freely to us every day. Like, how miraculous is that?
I'd
Right.
like to say, just from the simple analogy that our ancestors brought the first fruits to the temple, maybe I should ask everyone who comes to our Zoom Seder, bring a flower, a plant, a poem, bring something that you think is beautiful and sustaining, and just share it. I think I'm responding to what you were saying, Rabbi Bernstein, like people are being overloaded. I definitely appreciate Bill McKibben and all the other fabulous people, but I actually think people may need more space to express where they're at before they're able to take in more information. Not everybody.
I totally agree with that. And that's again why, like for me, I want the Haggadah to be a healing and joyful experience for people, right? So to feel like they're really receiving something so then they can give. And that's, you know, a lot of the environmental movement and even like a lot of Jewish environmental stuff is not oriented that way. It's just like let's go forward and, you know, let's overcome all of this. And, you know, I fear burnout. So for me, the nourishment part is a critical piece of the story.
I just got an email saying that the National Dayenu Network is going to have a song night online in 2 weeks. So I guess they're sensitive to that too.
Yeah. Ellen, I did want to make one point before you close, and just to for everyone to check the chat space for some of the resources that you were referring to, environmental organizations to contribute to for Afikomen gifts and just in general. But also the other thing that I do want to pitch is a plastic-free Passover. Which has been a big push in terms of how to prepare a Seder table, as you described earlier, with the addition of, you know, things from nature and, you know, setting a conscious table and avoiding the plastics, which are often so common and are really an important feature. So sorry, I just want to make sure people look at the chat and we'll make sure that all these resources are made available in following up with everyone.
Yeah, and I just put this page up and I will send this to Ellen and Marty. I have this as a PDF just about creating a beautiful and ecological Seder and conscious purchasing. So, you know, that's something that everyone can do.
Great. Thank you. This has been extraordinary, really extraordinary. Thank you. I think everyone feels the same way, inspired, and also sort of a sense of peace that we haven't felt very often these days in focusing this way. So thank you, Ellen.
Thank you. It was really a pleasure. And if you ever want to have a conversation again to pursue some of these ideas just as a conversation,
that would be great. That would be terrific. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you
Good
so
night.
much. It was so beautiful. Thank
It
you so
was
much.
very beautiful.
Thank you.
And your
Very
book is very
inspirational. Thank
beautiful.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Beautiful artwork.
Yes, incredible.
Thanks.
Gorgeous.
Beautiful.
Thank you very
Go
much.
to Amazon and write reviews.
We
Right.
will. We will. We will.
You will.
Thank you, Rabbi. You
Thank
hit
you.
some of the really important points that I always think about that have happened in my life. Like, we're not owners, we're residents, and you just hit everything in that book. It's great. I'm going to get
It's gorgeous.
at least a copy, if not many.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I just
you.
want to add my thanks into, and also that I work with children and art. The artwork is beautiful, and the idea together will be a lovely message to pass on in terms of doing workshops and such with the kids.
Lovely.
I look
Great.
forward to it.
That's great.
It's beautiful. It's our new Haggadah.
Great.
Forget Ben
All
Shahn.
right. Good
Great.
night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Good night, everybody. Night.
Bye.